Hello everybody, it's Mrs. Visconti and we're going to go over the steps for multiplying fractions. I've written them out in step by step. There are 4 main steps with some smaller steps in between, and we're going to go through and break down each one. So number 1 says that we're going to write the equation. This is pretty normal for math. Nothing exciting there except that you need to make sure that each number should be written as a fraction. Now there are 2 types of fractions that we can have. We can have improper fractions, or we can have proper fractions. So an example of each, an improper fraction would be 11 over 5, or a proper fraction would be 5 over 11. Those are examples of improper and proper fractions. So notice that I have the word that it's written as a fraction here, and each of these words have in their title, in their name, the word fraction. So no whole numbers and no mixed numbers. We're going to end up converting those into fractions to make them easier to multiply. Next, simplify. Do the numerators and denominators have any factors in common? And remember, a factor is a smaller number that equals a bigger number when you multiply them. So if I have the number 4, a factor of 4 would be 1 times 4 or 2 times 2. These numbers here are factors. And if your numerator or denominator have anything in common, you may use these factors to divide. And that simplifies the fraction. Step number 3, once you're done with 1 and 2, you now have your simplified fractions. You may multiply across. And you may multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. So if you think about these are like the fractions, and you're multiplying across the top and across the bottom. Lastly, you come to simplifying your answer. If it's written as an improper fraction, like our 11 over 5, you may simplify this by writing a 2, which is 10 and 1/5. So this would be your simplified answer. Now, not all math is going to ask you to simplify, but if it does, this is the last and final step. All right, let's use our notes off to the side here to help us remember our steps, and let's work on some problems in which we have to go through each of these steps. So the first one says to write the equation, so I've got it written out, but it does say that each number should be written as a fraction. This fraction here, 5 over 6, is fine, so I'm going to leave 5 over 6. It is a proper fraction. I'm going to bring down my multiplication sign. And now I'm going to work on this fraction. This is a mixed number. Notice the word says mixed number, not a mixed fraction. So because it does not have the word fraction in its title, we're going to change it so that it does. We're going to change it to an improper fraction. To do so, we multiply 1 times 3, which is our denominator. And then the answer to that is going to be 3, and we are going to add it to our 1 at our numerator spot, which is 4. So we're going to end up with a 4, and we're going to put it back on top of the denominator because we have not changed the number of pieces that we have as our whole. So our new fraction is going to be 4 over 3. All right, so the next step is to simplify, and simplify asks us to look for factors that any of the numerators or denominators have in common. And when we are simplifying, we're looking across. I notice I have 2 even numbers here, 6 and 4. 6 and 4 do have a factor in common, and that is the number 2. So I'm going to divide 6 by 2, and I'm going to get the answer 3, and I'm going to divide 4 by 2, and the answer is 2. So my new multipliers are now 5 times 2 and 3 times 3. So I'm going to rewrite those. Here so that it's clearer. And our next step says to multiply across. So we have those arrows showing us to go straight across. So I multiply 5 times 2, which is 10, and 3 times 3, which is 9. My final step is to simplify our answer. So since I have an improper fraction, I can simplify this. I'm going to get 1/9 out of 10, and I'm going to be left with 1/9. So 1 and 1/9 is our answer to our first problem. And that is how we step by step work through a multiplication of fractions. All right, let's look at another problem. This problem, I noticed right off the bat, has a whole number and a fraction. And my first step says that each number in my multiplication problem should be written as a fraction. So for my whole number, to write it as a fraction, I simply put it over 1, because this is telling me that I have 2 ones, and that is a whole number. My second step, now that I have it written out in fractions, says to simplify. Do any of my numerators and denominators have anything in common? And again, I have 2 even numbers, and one of them happens to be 2. That is easy. I know that I can divide any even number by 2. So I'm going to divide 2 by itself, and I get a 1. I'm going to divide 6 by 2, and I'm going to get a 3. To make it clear, I'm going to rewrite my fractions now with my simplified forms. Wow, we came out with a fairly simple answer here. So now we multiply across numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, using those arrows. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 3 is 3, which gives us a 3 over 3. To the final step, which is to simplify this answer. And when I have a 3 over 3 or any number over the same number, that tells me that I have the answer 1, because I'm saying that I have all 3 out of 3. So this is another example of using these steps to multiply fractions. All right, let's work on one last problem here. All right, so I have 2 mixed numbers, and as my first step says, I need to write them as a fraction, so we are going to write them as improper fractions. So what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to take each fraction and I'm going to work them out using the steps of making a mixed number into an improper fraction. So actually, let's go right below. So first we multiply 4 times 1, which gives us 4. And then we take the answer to that, 4 plus 3, and we add it to our numerator, which gives us a 7. So I end up with a 7 over 4. I bring down my multiplication. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go 4 times 2, which is 8. So I have 8 plus 1, which is 9. So I have a 9 over 4. Another way to think about this whole number is also a fraction. It's a 4 over 4. So if I have 4 over 4 plus 4 over 4 plus a 1 over 4, so these two are whole numbers, plus that fraction, I end up with 9 over 4. So that is how I get this answer. All right, so now we do any kind of simplifying possible. As you can see, there is no factor that 7 and 4 or 4 and 9 have in common. So we are just going to leave them as they are. So we have 7 over 4 times 9 over 4, and we are going to multiply across. So now we are on step 3, multiply across. So I have 63 as my numerator, and I have 16 as my denominator. My last step is to simplify. So simplifying this one might be a little trickier. You can do it a number of ways. You can do repeated addition of 16 until you get close to 63, or you can multiply as many 16s as you can. So if we go 16 times 1, and then 16 times 2, and then 16 times 3. And remember, you're getting as close to 63 without going over. In the end, you're going to multiply 16 times 3. 6 times 3 is 8. Or, excuse me, 18. And you carry that 1, and then you have a 4. So you end up with 3 and 15 over 16. So our simplified answer comes out to 3 and 15 over 16. So once again, here are the notes for multiplying fractions step by steps. First, we write the equation. We make sure each number is written as a fraction, whether it's improper or proper. Then we simplified. We ask ourselves the question, do the numerators and denominators have any factors in common? And then we multiply across once we have simplified, multiply numerator by numerator and denominator by denominator. And then we simplify our answer. And we can put it back then into from an improper to a proper or mixed number. Thank you for following along. These notes will be in our Google Classroom to help you out with any of the math. Bye.